Chapter 19. 2 weeks later. The city was losing its appeal. People were rude. No one seemed to be aware of anyone or anything around them. I forever felt like a foreigner because each building and roadway was still making an impression over my mind. I remember looking around midway through my commute somewhere only to realize that most people moved like little laser beams. Others pinned to a phone screen and just kind of bebopping. But all doing basically anything not to connect with the fellow city dwellers directly in their surroundings. If I could give this city a vibe, it would be stay in your lane. Maybe people weren't so much rude as they were dismissive. I had to remind myself constantly. You're fresh meat. Be patient. Feel it out. You just feel ungrounded. Don't let that get the best of your attitude. It had been a comforting thought. I held on to it. I needed to make sure I was taking care of myself in the meantime. My wrist was constantly warm, thanks to my new promise with my rubber band. The bruise had turned into a welt. In fact, I was getting ready to switch wrists. In any case, it seemed to be working. I was only swearing with my inside voice, never externally, which also served up a dilemma in the rules of my game. If no one else hears me, does it really count? In the end, it counted, because I heard me. I am a person. What I witness counts to me more than anything else, so yes. I was going to pull this weed at its root, my very own consciousness. On the job front, I'd had a coffee meeting with a nice couple to discuss a nanny and tutoring position. They were nice enough. The child was unnerving. His eyes were ice cold. He didn't smile. He watched the entire scene and never spoke. The look in his eyes was far away, and by far the most haunting aspect of his entire demeanor. There's no way someone so young is medicated. The thought occurred to me. But sure enough, he'd been diagnosed with ADHD the year before, and they'd finally found a dose of his medication that calmed him down. In that moment, while I was listening, the way they described it sounded monstrous to me. No matter what nice words his mother used, all I could hear was, "My child has more energy than I know how to direct, so I'm drugging his young mind and creating the greatest hypocrisy ever to exist." All in the name of modifying his behavior without helping him find an outlet that was a more positive use of his energy. Don't do drugs, okay? Unless they're the ones we say are alright and make you pay out your ass for the rest of forever. Snap. In the end, I didn't take the job. I kept searching for something I could really get behind and feel energized by, while learning to play the writing game and waiting out the waves of the queer equestry. I couldn't kick that situation, though. I tried to imagine having to take a pill every single day, because people around me saw my behavior as unfitting. Or would I want to anyway, just because it was too much work otherwise to follow so many guidelines that pitted me directly against myself? I started researching, a rabbit hole that led me to a momentary lapse in judgment, where I thought maybe I'd had ADHD. And then everyone else I knew. What a weird thing to label something completely normal, manifesting in a completely unnatural environment. Think about it. Kids are in an exploratory phase of their life when they're school age, and yet they're told to sit down and be quiet and listen to lessons that have absolutely nothing to do with exploration. Things that should be reserved for intellectual minds, ready to be taught, not programmed. I had to put down the research leads because the entire system was starting to feel a little fishy. No need to scream conspiracy when incompetence would do. So after about an hour of searching through studies and abnormal psychological listings, I convinced myself I might have cycled over my lifetime through each of the options described as chronic mental illnesses. Then I realized, upon further examination, that I'd exuded every trait from each new disorder I'd come across. But with a little attention and some refocusing, running, eating better, flexing some willpower over one thing or another, while dangling a satisfactory carrot in front of my face for motivation, each of the dysfunctions would grow into something completely different, something I enjoyed being around, a little more than the dysfunctional trait I'd exercised my way out of, or away from, because I'd seen someone else exuding the trait right in front of me, either in a character from a book I was reading, or a real live-action interaction between two people that I got to witness, and it scared me straight, back into a better way of doing things. After about 2 more hours, I closed my laptop and rubbed my eyes. I would start fresh in the morning. Part of me wondered if I should take the nanny job, for the sake of the little man being snowed into thinking he was dysfunctional and in need of sedation. I clutched my fists. I mean, people treat dogs better these days, and understand them more as well. How can they be so oblivious to the natural way of being a child? Maybe they didn't experience childhood. The thought came to me and left me chewing. My fists balled further as I remembered all the things I'd been called, and how the bullying and rejection in past phases had battle-hardened me for this very moment. I was suddenly grateful that this hadn't been my first rodeo. I could handle these rejections, and I could deal them out too. I wasn't desperate, and I never would be, because life would always provide for me in one way or another. I was sure of it. I clicked open my inbox and printed off the next 2 rejections that had found me earlier in the morning. I'd started a wall, not to shame myself, but to get me ready for the big moment when the golden ticket came in. I nodded. I could handle these rejections. Out of the letters and emails pouring back to me, at least a few had seemed authentic. One letter had even said, "We enjoy your concepts and the freshness of your work. The illustrations are just wonderful. We'll keep your portfolio on file and revisit it in the near future. Thank you for your interest in our publishing company. But we regret to inform you that currently we do not have a place for your title in the genre of children and adult fairy tale fiction. Interesting genre title. Best wishes." That had seemed heartfelt. It somehow stung less because it was personalized to me. They had taken the time to humanize me and appreciate my effort. I pinned that 3-fold piece of paper to the top of my rejection pyramid. I didn't mind being eye to eye with that one. Most of the others felt like politely given garbage sandwiches, and each time I passed them, they meant less to me. They were given graciously, but they still contained nothing of substance. Nothing telling me what I could have done better, or how to improve moving forward, or why they'd chosen to go a different route. Maybe even why it hadn't fit genres I totally thought it did. Thank you for trying, but your best won't be good enough, and we have no good reason for why. Blah. I know I'm being overdramatic, but there were days I sat against the opposite wall, looking at my pyramid of ammunition, and imagined drizzling it and gasoline and flicking a bic to torch it. Just to watch the rejections burn into ash, it made me feel less smoldery. One. All it takes is one. That became my mantra. I concluded after that day that I didn't want to spend the entire time I was allowing myself to pursue the dream worrying about where I would work when it fell through. I need a way to support myself eventually, and I want it to be something to do with our mission, Maddie. I remember thinking that over and over again. By the end of the day, after 2 final rejections struck and bounced off me, without so much as a sting or a second look, I decided I did what I did for a reason. Now I was developing an immunity to the final fear that could take hold of my vision and squeeze the life out of it. I had to get rid of the last strings of pride and ego reigning me, and apparently submersion therapy was life's prescription for me. I was being so immersed into rejection, I either had to sink or swim. Life meant for me to be right where I was, or I wouldn't have felt compelled to do what I'd done after everything I'd already been through. Over the next few weeks, I decided I wanted to focus my attention on replenishing my stock of emails and people to contact. I figured I would do more outreach every day until enough acceptances poured in that I could at least get a solid start. I sent out samples of short stories for competitions. I submitted journal articles and little clickbait pieces, some with deadlines that were months away. I thought it might be a fun way to invest a few hours of creative fuel to follow a prompt into a practice session. For a couple of weeks, I did 2 of those a day, some of them costing me a few dollars for entry fees. Most were free, and all of the competitions came with cash prizes or the promise of being published and approached again for longer-term employment as a staff writer. All of it was exciting stuff. Between the competitions and writing bids, I found time to answer help-wanted ads as they came to me, or inspired my curiosity. I truly didn't care what the answers were, so long as I was doing my part. Life was going to open the right door. I just felt it in my bones. Worst case scenario, I ended up where I started, begging my old boss for my job and room back until I found a little apartment above the bank. I always did like the old brick of that building. It had been a printing press at one time. Turdville was suddenly staring me down through a rosy lens. I wouldn't take the bait. There was no way it would come to that. Life put me through that whole mess and brought me out and gave me the courage and desire to come here. It had to be for something outside of torturing me further. I just knew it. I came here for a reason, and I wouldn't leave until I found out what it was. I might stumble around a shit ton. Snap. I'd stumble the junk out of this obstacle course until I made it out on top. Just the way we always planned.